Hey guys, Maniac here with GameAccess.net doing my next GameAccess podcast. This is podcast number 9. The subject we're going to be talking about this week is The Darkness, which is kind of funny that I'm going to be deciding that I'm talking about this, especially since this is a gaming website. But The Darkness actually has just released its second game this month, and it's been a property since I think the first Darkness game came out around summer 2007. So it's already got a gaming pedigree, and is certainly, as long as it's got a gaming pedigree, is ripe for me to talk about it as far as I'm concerned. Now, everyone knows that The Darkness started off as a comic book property. I believe Silvestri was the guy who created it, and it was for Top Cow. There are other basic concepts that are used in the Darkness family, the Witchblade, the Angelus, and stuff like that. So a lot of those other things were used in the. It's not a property all by itself. There are other properties that are kind of sister properties and stuff like that. But for the purposes of this conversation, unless there have been tie-ins, I'm only going to be talking about the major gaming history and stuff like that behind it, not so much the comic book history, because to be perfectly honest, I didn't really get into the comic book interests of it until the game came out. It's kind of interesting because I first became aware of The Darkness just around the time the first Darkness game was going to get released. I remembered that there was a segment on it that was being done by the official Xbox magazine. They had done a video preview of it on the little game disc that they included with each issue. And I started watching it, just out of interest, and I thought it was quite impressive, and I thought it was an interesting concept. We got to see a very early portion of Grinder's Lane in the meatpacking level. And I kind of liked how it was stylized. I kind of liked what the objectives were. And some of the concepts that the developers talked about were also interesting to me. Also, when I found out that Starbreeze was working on it, I also was very interested because I was a huge fan of their previous game, The Chronicles of Riddick: Escape from Butcher Bay. While I had not played that version of the game on the Xbox, I did in fact play it when it came to PC. The Director's Cut was originally released to the PC. And it later got ported on years later when they worked on the Riddick sequel, Assault on Dark Athena. So after all that said, again, based upon the interest in Starbreeze as well as the early preview I saw in the Xbox magazine, that piqued my interest. On top of that, the game got released at a very interesting time in gaming thing. It was 1 year after it was 2007, which was pretty much 1 year into the major gaming, how do I put this? The gaming generation had just really started up. And 2007 was a summer that there weren't really that many big gaming releases, to be perfectly honest. While the Xbox 360 and the PS3 had their launch titles that were on shelves and everything else, there wasn't really that much else that was available, especially not for the PS3. That summer, I was working at the University of Connecticut as a just basically staff there, working a summer program, having a good time, getting paid pretty well for it. And with the money that I got from that job, I had been waiting for the longest time. I mean, The Darkness had come out for quite a while, and I wasn't able to pick it up until sometime after I finally got paid. And that was the first game I picked up, I think, and I picked up the Xbox 360 version. Later on, I think I picked up a PS3 for separate reasons. I'm sure people who listen to my Resistance podcast could certainly attest to that. But I'm getting sidetracked. But I definitely remembered. I only had the weekends off. I did not have my weekdays because I'd be working during the weekdays. And as such, I had to basically squeeze in as much gaming as I possibly could during the weekends because I had to return to work on the weekdays. So that having been said, when I finally did get a chance to pick up the game and finally start playing it, I could only make about 1 or 2 acts of the game basically per weekend. I wasn't able to finish it immediately. And it just really it just really got into my interests because the game itself, as I've been playing up to that point, had a lot going for it. One, I thought the visual style was quite interesting. I really did like the visual aesthetic for the engine in Escape from Butcher Bay, and I liked how they improved it for the next generation consoles when they brought it for the Darkness. I really liked the look of it. I also really liked the acting especially with the motion captured acting. They were using an interesting technology where they were motion capturing, at least on that game, they were motion capturing the person all at the same time. And I don't remember how groundbreaking this technology was, but they were motion capturing. At least they said the voice and the face at the and the body at the same time. Now they don't do that much anymore. Even nowadays, as far as I could tell, usually they motion capture voice and face separately. Now that's usually because it's usually played by two different actors. Voice and face and body are usually played by separate actors. But even in some cases where it's same actors, they usually do voice and face separate. The only other cases I can remember where they would do voice and face at the same time for any game would be for Heavenly Sword. Heavenly Sword did voice face at the same time, and they used the same actor for both. So it was kind of interesting in that respect, and I thought it really came for a fluid performance for the characters. Because I've seen other games like, let's say L.A. Noire, for example, and I've seen a lot of reviewers complain about this, where they really used a whole new different type of motion capture technology when it came to the facial features and stuff like that, but they recorded the facial features differently than they recorded the body features. So when you look at the game, you can see that the face looks right and you can see that the body looks right, but when you put them together, it almost seems like they don't match. It seems like the facial and the body performance don't really add up. And that wasn't a problem in the Darkness, especially given the fact of when Jackie would go into his monologues during some of the loading screens. And it just really hammered home for me just how cool and I really liked the performance of the guy that they got to play Jackie in the first game. So after all that being said, I thought that was a great moment. I thought that I really liked the art style. I really liked the acting. I thought the acting was absolutely phenomenal. I really liked the story because I thought that if I had some type of science fiction or fantasy that I loved the most, especially when it came to comic books, because I'm not saying I'm a huge comic book fan, but I definitely remembered I loving kind of less beloved characters. Like when I was in college, I was really into Daredevil, and later on, my friends started getting me into like Watchmen before it became a movie, and V for Vendetta and stuff like that, and some of the more some of the older Batman stories from the early mid '90s and stuff like that. I always liked that kind of comic, the gritty, realistic type comic, and I thought that when the way that the Darkness was portrayed in the video game really just rang my bell perfectly, because it just met every type of interest that I liked, in that it was a grounded type of reality, but it was still real. It had a really cool interactivity with the world when you had the phone systems and you had the people with, you could call people and you could leave messages and you could hear other people's messages, and you could visit the city and you could watch televisions and all this cool stuff, and you could do jobs for people, and if you did the jobs for people, then that would unlock other jobs and stuff like that. I really liked all that. And then you had the Darkness, which I also liked. Now, I really don't want to get into the origins of the Darkness or anything like that, because that would be going into a comic book philosophical debate, and I really don't want to talk about that much. But I thought it kind of, spoke to a very interesting mythology. And I don't know what the inspiration was for the Darkness from the original writers, because, like I said, I haven't really followed that. But it definitely felt like an interesting mythology to be pulling it from. It felt like it was grounded in some type of mythology that had already been written, like the whole concept of a guy becoming superpowered as an inheritance, and on his 21st birthday, it happening and everything else. So it was cool on that respect. And they kind of kept out some of the more, they kept out some of the major background and stuff like that for some of the later from some of the comics. I like that a lot. So they told just enough story and background about the darkness in the first game, and they didn't go overboard. So I thought that was the right touch. I also thought probably one of the best scenes ever was when you saw the visions of hell in the first game, in which case you had the World War I trenches. And probably one of the most disturbing and yet profound moments in that scene was one of the very early beginning portions of that the hell chapter, the first hell chapter, when you make it to the Allied trenches after escaping from the Axis from the German trenches. There's a corner marked the suicide corner, and you see this guy messing around with a rifle for a long period of time in utter anguish, and eventually, after a minute or two, he finally does bring it to himself to take his own life. That was just so well presented. Just a horrible, tragic scene. I don't think I've ever seen another company try something like that. The closest I think I ever saw anybody get was Halo. The first Halo game, when you run into a private who had obviously at one point had seen the flood. You didn't know that's what he saw, but he's just babbling and absolutely out of his mind for what he saw. And I think they cut it down. You just hear him scream, and then eventually he stops screaming. Some people would probably, some people do shoot him. But I definitely remember the commentators when they were talking about that scene. I don't remember if it was Marty O'Donnell or Joe Staten who said it, or Jason Jones who said it, but one of the three guys who did the commentary for Halo said it, and that the original design for him was going to be that you were going to hear him babbling and babbling and babbling, and then when you finally walked away, after you had walked away a certain distance and you weren't looking anymore, you would hear a simple gunshot and he would shut up, and it would be implied that he had taken his own life. Now, I don't remember that gunshot being in the final version of the game. If anybody says that they remember hearing it, by all means post a comment and remind me. But I don't remember that gunshot actually making it into the final version of the game. He does eventually shut up, but I don't remember the gunshot. So I think that's the closest I ever saw of a suicide in any video game. And obviously it was tragic, but it was to show like this was a horrible, horrible, horrible reality. And that's the kind of thing that that would happen to some people. Of course, it's hell. He's probably just going to go right back. It's not going to do anything to him. He's probably just going to end up right back where he was. But I thought that was interesting. On top of that, at one point in the game, Jackie takes his own life. In fact, actually, that's how he got there in the first place, if I remember correctly. He ended up in hell because he had taken his own life. But with Jackie, in his case, even if he takes his own life, death is just death in hell is basically just like a temporary quarter for him. He'll just end up back after a couple days. I guess I take it back. Kratos tried it. Kratos tried suicide. Too. But God of War 3 didn't come out until much later, and in the first God of War games, his suicide was not successful. So he had been killed once or twice and ended up in Hades, but he hadn't committed suicide, at least not as far as I can remember, until God of War 3. Spoilers. Well, talking about the cultural impact of this game, I really liked, getting back to the darkness, I really liked how well that they had leveled up all the gameplay, story, and characters and everything else. And I thought it just met perfectly with all those respects. And I really liked how they did it. So without trying to break any, flow of certain things, like I said, most of the stuff I teased, I said what has happened has already happened in like the first two acts of the game, so I'm not really giving out any end game information. And for the most part, everyone kind of knows the end game information because there's trailers out for The Darkness 2 that already pretty much detail specifically what happened. Jenny gets killed, who's Jackie's girlfriend. Jackie's girlfriend gets killed in the very early portion of the game, so it's really, really traumatic when it happens. He's unable to save her because the darkness stops him from saving her. And after she's killed, he takes his own life. It's not successful. The darkness just brings him back, and he devotes himself to going after the people that killed his girlfriend. He, at the end of the game, gets his revenge, and we go into after some time passes, we go into the second game. I know I'm kind of ruining it for you, but then again, this is all set in the second game. If I had some complaints about the first game, it probably all revolved around multiplayer. Multiplayer code was bugged to hell. Very laggy, very laggy. I don't know what was up with some of the early Xbox 360 games, especially some of the multi-platform Xbox 360 games, but netcode was just terrible on some of those early games. Obviously now they've definitely improved. I guess it's because they've had some time to solve the problems of how netcode works on these various infrastructures. But I definitely remember that even with patches, they if you had more than one user, especially one that was on a not a so good connection, it could bring the whole game down. And a lot of the achievements on Darkness, the first Darkness game, were all about winning games, and they were about winning a lot of games. That would take forever. And to be perfectly honest, it'd be difficult to see if you would actually have players that would be willing to play that much to actually win that much based upon the buggy netcode. But it worked from what I've been told, that would work in local games, and locally the games actually weren't as laggy. So if I had any complaints, it was about that first game's multiplayer. So after all that being said, some of my favorite portions of that first game probably were, like I said, the end of the first chapter, the scenes with Jenny early on in the game, where you basically go to see her and it's your birthday and she gives you a cake and you watch To Kill a Mockingbird together. That's a great scene. And because it just, it was just so well done between like two people and everything else. When you have when you're in a relationship, that's kind of the dynamic that that was just perfect. And obviously, like I said, it's a fictional medium, but I thought for a fictional medium, I thought they captured like a relationship dynamic very well. And it really probably brought a lot of players to be even more upset when what happens to Jenny happens. So there was that. Other favorite segments, I'm trying to remember. I'm probably going to get back to them later on. I love the characters a lot, and that's really it. So the game ends, and just like with anything, you want more. And I remembered that actually Top Cat was talking about that they had released, and I guess I missed out on this, a 5-part miniseries for the Darkness, with which was kind of like a revamp or a retelling of the game itself. I actually ended up ordering the issues through their website, and I gotta say though, I was disappointed by it. Some of the early issues, especially the issue 0, wasn't that bad, but when they finally started retelling the game itself in a comic book medium, at least for those 5 issues, I don't even think I remembered reading issue 5. Because I just kind of thought it kind of was going downhill every issue. I don't know if that was intentional, but it just seemed like the game story wasn't translating very well to a 5-part comic book medium. When they were telling a story they didn't have to tell through the game, in particular the backstory in the issue 0, I thought that worked pretty well because it was an independent story that they could just kind of tell. But when they were translating over the game to the books, they were adding in scenes that weren't needed. They were taking away scenes that were needed, and it seemed like they didn't really capture the Darkling very well. At least not the Darkling as depicted in the first game. I think they were kind of more depicting the Darkling in the comic books as opposed to how the Darklings were depicted in the games, because the Darkling in the first video game wasn't intelligent. It was cannon fodder, basically. You had 4 different ones of them, and they would keep coming back, but you'd basically use it as cannon fodder, and each would have its own thing. So there really wasn't that much personality, although they were voiced by one of the guys who did Invader Zim, which was great, because I'm a huge Invader Zim fan. I have a friend that got me into Invader Zim. But after all that being said, and all that done, I still wanted more game. And we waited quite a while for people to talk about it. Now, it was heavily expected, at least by me, that if there was going to be a sequel to The Darkness, it was probably going to be done by 2K Games and Starbreeze. Now, Starbreeze, after The Darkness, started work on the Riddick sequel, Assault on Dark Athena, and I think that because they couldn't get the Escape from Butcher Bay to work on the Xbox 360, they said it was just impossible. There was no way they could get it to work. That they were going to basically use port the game over and include it as part of a bonus thing to the Dark Athena disc, so that if you picked up Dark Athena for for whatever platform, you'd be able to play Butcher Bay on that as well. To be perfectly honest, I was okay with this because I had played Dark. I remember playing Butcher Bay on the PC, which was a director's cut. It did have some extended levels and stuff like that. It also had things like the commentary, which was not on the Xbox 360 version. That having been said, I think I probably would have appreciated playing the controls on the console version better, but the PC controls weren't that bad. It's just the PC version had more features. However, I think even the PC version, I had problems getting that working on Windows Vista and Windows 7. So, I don't know, maybe, it was a good thing that they decided to pre-release it even for the PC. But basically, when we knew that if Starbreeze was working on the Riddick sequel, they wouldn't be working on the Darkness. But there were musings. I mean, people were talking about a Darkness sequel for quite some time. I don't know exactly what was going on, and maybe Starbreeze had started working on it, but I think I remember Starbreeze talking about it, that they couldn't talk about it, and 2K was hush about it. And then, probably sometime just before PAX, this past year, 2K announced that The Darkness 2 was coming. 3 years after the first Darkness game, and that it was going to be a new developer. I felt kind of mixed about it because I really liked Starbreeze, and I was kind of hoping that Darkness 2 was going to be done by Starbreeze. But that having been said, I love Digital Extremes. I think they're really good. I remembered a lot of their early PC work in like various multiplayer games and stuff like that, and I thought they were a great studio house, and I was kind of interested in seeing where they were going to go with this. I read a lot of the initial previews of it from a PAX. I don't remember which one. Might have been PAX Seattle, might have been PAX Boston, I don't know. And them talking about it and thinking, wow, this is really interesting. I can't, they had changed the visual style of it. They had changed the control system. But they still kept within that universe, within that game's universe. And that impressed me quite a bit. I liked that. So at last year's E3, The Darkness 2 ended up being one of the first games I got to see demoed. Based upon my initial previews of it and my initial love of the first game, I went to go check out The Darkness 2 at E3. I was going in kind of hoping to see maybe, an extension of what we had seen for what I read in the PAX preview, and instead we saw something else entirely. We got to see what turned out to be one of the last levels actually in the game, when Jackie is going into the carnival. We saw him break into the carnival and visit some of the scenes, and we got to see some of the early portions of what the battle mechanics were like and what the upgrade trees were. Now, don't get me wrong, the visual style certainly remained in the game. It was just the gameplay moments got tweaked and stuff like that. But, of course, that could have just been for the fact it was designed that way for demo purposes. So there's that, too. But I wasn't as greatly impressed by it as I would be later on. But it still interested me about the game. And on top of that, just before New York Comic Con, just before the San Diego Comic Con, they started announcing that they were going to be releasing these limited edition Darkling statues and giving them away. I saw the Darklings what the statue looked like, and I'm like, I freaking have to have one. It looked phenomenal. It looked so detailed, so good looking, and everything else. I'm like, I gotta have one of these. But I wasn't going to the San Diego Comic Con because I had gone to E3. I couldn't go back to I just couldn't afford it. And so I missed out. I thought I missed out on that. I thought I missed my chance. So fast forward sometime down the road, I check in my press credentials and I make myself eligible to go to the New York Comic Con, which was in October. And I get in. And I'm happy as I can be because I knew that there were going to be a lot of games shown at the New York Comic Con that I was very interested in seeing. So after all that being said, when I go to the New York Comic Con, and one of the first games I get to demo is The Darkness 2. That was like one of the games I was really interested in. They had live demos set up, and they had a very, very interesting setup with like all the Xbox 360 demo units, and they had the booth set up to make them look like subway tunnels, which I thought looked really cool. So it was almost like the inside of a subway station. Got to meet some of the 2K guys, Elizabeth, David, a bunch of cool people, really nice people. And they were doing some promotional stuff. They were handing out all kinds of different swag. They had masks, and they were giving away the Darkless statues. So when I was working on, right after I finished up with with playing the Dark, playing my demo, I tweeted about it. Because I plan on doing a preview of it probably after I was done with the event. I didn't have the time to write the preview that day. I ended up writing the preview after the show was over. But the next morning, I got a tweet from Elizabeth at 2K saying, "Congratulations, you won a Darkling." And I thought, awesome. The thing was that day, I knew I was going to be at the IGN booth all day. Or not the IGN booth, the IGN theater all day because I was going to be interested in seeing the Avengers preview. So I swung on by the 2K booth and they said, don't worry about it. We're going to mail it to you. And I was kind of asking them, could you sign it? That was what I was thinking about. But they were going to mail it to me, so it was okay. And actually, later on, I talked to David. And David Eggers, if you're listening to this, you're an awesome dude. They actually mailed me a Darkling. And ironically enough, that wasn't the first Darkling I had won. I actually won a different one on the Twitter feed. So I actually have 2 Darkling statues. And the second one that they sent me, all the guys at the 2K publisher signed it. So it was awesome. But that New York Comic Con demo, which I got to play, really was what cemented my interest in it. And the reason why was because the opening. We got to play the opening. Now, I remember reading about the opening previews with, when some of the early pack stuff was saying the opening where Jackie is in this, restaurant. It's like Goodfellas, and he's walking through it, and it gets attacked, and he's sitting with 2 hot twins, and all this good stuff. And I thought, that's interesting. I wish, I kind of was hoping secretly that was what we got to see at E3, but they, I understood their decision to choose not to see this because, they had already been shown at PAX, and so I guess they wanted to show something different. But in this case, what they were doing was they were showing something playable at the New York Comic Con. You could play these segments. And I remembered having a very positive having a very positive feeling about it, playing those segments early on. In fact, I was telling the demo guys, heck, I remembered more about the first Darkness game than some of the 2K guys were. I don't remember which, but I remember one guy couldn't remember that Mike Patton had played the Darkness or something like that. Not Mike Patton, the guy who played Kirk Alvecchio had played Jackie in the first game, because I'm listening to it. I'm expecting Kirk Alvecchio's voice from the first, who played Jackie in the first game, because I loved him in the first game. And I'm hearing a different voice, and I say it's like, it's not Kirk, and he's like, no, it's not Kirk. They got somebody different, but it's still Mike Patton as the Darkness. You get me? So it was. I didn't like the demo. How do I say this? I didn't like the demo voice of not of Mike Patton, but of the Jackie guy in the demo. But I definitely, I don't know. The voice sounded different in the full version of the game and in the demo. But I remember, I don't know, either the voice warmed up to me or they changed the voice from the New York Comic Con demo, because it sounded different. I think in the final version of the game it sounded fantastic. So whoever they got to be the voice of Jackie in the second game, I don't remember his name, but props to you, you did a good job. So after all that being said, I come home, I start doing the previews, and I'm waiting for my Darkling. The first Darkling shows up. And I immediately do the unboxing. If you look at my YouTube channel, you can find my unboxing of that. The other thing that I remembered was that for those of you who know anything about comics or are interested in comics, once a year there's this free comic book day. And 2K by that point had already decided to be a part of it. Along with, usually with the free comic book day, they include all the publishers come together, and they usually will do reprintings and stuff like that, and they'll ship a whole bunch of different books to various comic book retailers all across the country, who will basically just hand them out for free. And if you go to the comic book shops on those days and you pick up a comic book that's labeled, free comic book day, as long as they're still, as long as the comic book stores have them in stock, you can just literally put them up on the counter and say, "Is this still free?" And the comic book guy will say, "Yeah, take it." And you can take your issues and be done. They chose to actually include a Darkness comic book as part of Free Comic Book Day. And I remember I was going to this comic book shop that my friend Twitch frequents the day we were going to go see the movie Thor together. And we decided to go to a comic book shop and then go see Thor. And obviously there were a lot of Thor books that were being reprinted and coming up. But I was most interested in doing the comic book shop because I wanted to go on Free Comic Book Day to pick up that issue because I knew that it was not a reprinting. I knew that it was a one-off. And I thought it was an interesting comic book because it was a really good art style and it had a really good way of retelling the story of the first game. And anticipation, it really had a really cool way of anticipating where the game is going. I also did my first ever comic book review for my YouTube channel. Sorry, Linkara. And again, if you go through my YouTube channel, you'll probably find that, where I kind of talked about the comic book issue and what I thought about it. And I thought it was actually a pretty cool comic, although kind of short, had a great art style to it, but it didn't really tell its own story. It kind of was just like its own story. It was a story. It retold the story of the first game. But it was interesting because here was a comic book that was based upon a video game that was based upon a comic book. But this book that came out on Free Comic Book Day was in its own continuity of the games as opposed to the comics. So I thought, on a metaphysical level, that was kind of interesting. So you had the comic book, you had all this swag that I'm accumulating left and right. I had 2 Darklings, I had a comic book, I had a bunch of masks. I had a bunch of previews from like the New York Comic Con and E3 and everything else. My interest couldn't have been higher for the second game. And on launch night, I remembered picking up The Darkness 2 for my Xbox 360, day and date. In fact, actually, I think I picked it up at that midnight. And I remembered some of the guys were talking about at the store. In fact, I think 1 or 2 of them had like a demo unit set up, so that was kind of interesting. But to whet the appetite of the release night, a couple nights before, and this happened recently, so as far, I'm sure a lot of people are like, this just happened. So yeah, Maniac, I'm turning on something recently. But there was this, 2K decided that they wanted to do a live feed about a week before the game got released, where they were going to demo the game for the public for the first time. Well, I should say the final version of the game for the first time. And they were going to show the multiplayer, which while they had released trailers for it and they were doing a few previews for it, they hadn't really shown that much of. Now, I thought that was really cool because I don't know exactly how often game developers are using these live feeds as kind of like a promotional thing. I only remembered EA doing it just before the release of the Dead Space 2. They actually did a live feed of one of their last meetings, actually, and they decided to broadcast it to everybody on the web. I really liked it a lot. I thought that was really cool. And here was 2K showing the game, and you could talk with the developers, and you could talk with the 2K guys, who were all fantastic people, really nice people, about the game, and they previewed for the first time, the final version. I thought that was really cool. Playing the second game when it finally did come out was everything I could have imagined it was going to be. it was just fluid. The controls were fantastic. Way improved. I remembered, I asked the 2K developers about this. When the demo came out, and you can get this on the Xbox 360 and the PS3, it was very similar to the demo that I had played in the New York Comic Con, but it felt to me two things. One, it felt extended. There was like a moment or two extra that wasn't included in the New York Comic Con build, and the controls felt a hell of a lot sharper and tighter. The controls were better than the New York Comic Con build. And I asked the developers about that, and they said the same thing. It's like, yes, that was, but then again, like I said, they said, yes, it was, and yes, it had been improved, so it wasn't a New York Comic Con build. It was it was some of the same sequences, but it was extended, and they had improved the controls. So it was great playing that again, because I really loved that demo at the Comic Con, and it was great getting to, download it on my Xbox and play it. So kudos to 2K, for taking what worked and for improving it and bring, releasing it to a wide audience, because that, as far as I was concerned, was a really great way to sell your game, because that was a great choice for how they decided to stitch together that demo. Those segments were just perfect to use. So after the final version of the game comes out, I remembered playing just that game straight, all the way through, as much as I possibly could, as quickly as, And what was so tough was that, here I thought there was not just two here there was like, it felt to me like this game, at least for The Darkness 2, was more than just one campaign. It was more than just a single player campaign. There was a whole multiplayer campaign included with it. And more than that, it was more than just a multiplayer campaign. It was like multiple multiplayer campaigns, because you had not only a multiplayer campaign itself, but you had 4 different characters for that multiplayer campaign, as well as a whole bunch of different one-off levels and vendetta levels and everything else. So to me, the game went on and on forever. It was just so much of it. And I'm a completionist, so not only did I want to get every achievement in the game, but I also wanted to get every multiplayer level. I wanted to beat every multiplayer level. I wanted to level up completely every multiplayer character, and there were 4 of them. I wanted to, to play every vendetta, including the vendettas that require more than one player. But I really appreciated that 2K decided to design it the way that you could actually play most of the multiplayer campaign by yourself. I really appreciate that, because even at launch, what's the chance that you're going to have a friend that also has a copy of the game? It's pretty low. None of my friends have a copy of The Darkness 2. So I knew that I was going to be playing the multiplayer, not with my friends, but either by myself or with people I would be match made with, which was, again, fine. But I'm really glad. It would have been a lot harder had I not been able to play the levels alone. If I had been required to play the levels with someone else, it would have taken longer for me to get through it all. Because while there were plenty of people matchmaking at launch, I would have had to wait in the line and never, for a match made game, just all kinds of stuff. So it saved me some time. Plus, I like playing games alone. There's a time when I like being social, and there's a time when I like being alone. And to me, I remember I really did want to play through that whole initial campaign by myself, so it was good. I don't think I had as much fun with a multiplayer campaign in quite a while. I'm usually not much of a multiplayer guy. Very few multiplayer games actually interest me. Except for maybe some of the classics, Quake, Unreal Tournament, that sort of thing, of course, obviously. Cooperative play, I enjoy quite a bit. I love Gears of War cooperative play. Obviously there's that. I loved Halo's cooperative play. Multiplayer cooperative play, but not the split screen. But I remember just enjoying every second on that multiplayer. I don't know if it was the humor, although that was a part of it. I don't remember if it was the characters, but that was a part of it too. Not just the playable characters, but some of the non-playable characters were just awesome. I loved Johnny Powell, and if I had my favorite line in the multiplayer campaign, it was when it was at the end of the second level, when Johnny is saying, "I need you to bring this back, and I need you to bring this back," and then he says, "Oh, and I want you to bring me back a burger and fries. The only food here they got here is Italian." And I'm just thinking to myself, having been raised by Italians, yes, I feel the same. I feel your pain, Johnny Powell, because after eating Italian food my whole life, I just can't eat it anymore. I just can't. I can't eat. I just can't. I'm just sick of it. I just don't like it. I just don't. I'll eat a meatball occasionally. Those are okay, but I can't eat. I can't stomach macaroni. I just can't. I've had to eat it too much. Um, if there's any, I like every other type of food in this world except Italian food. It seems. Now I know a lot of people are going to say, "Well, you're absolutely insane," and the truth is like I think it was oversaturation. I've eaten too much of it. I'm just sick of it. So Johnny Powell, I tip my hat to you. Or at least somebody had to say, somebody had to finally say it about it. Other things I really liked was, so like I said, I was going back and forth between the multiplayer and the single player campaign. Really liked the single player campaign a lot. Really liked the Darkling. And on the day that I finally cracked open the for my unboxing, I was going to use my Darkling statue as like a prop for the unboxing. One of the Darkling's arms fell out of its socket for no reason. I was just adjusting it. It fell out of the socket onto my parents' new floor because I was making sure to adjust it in my parents' place because it looked close enough to Jackie's mansion, and I had seen previews of the Jackie's mansion in the live feed, and it shattered into about 6 or 7 pieces, ruining the arm. Now, if anybody knows or anything like that, like what that does to the value of this thing, I found all the pieces of it. It wasn't easy, but I found every piece. What's the value mean of that thing once if just one arm is shattered? Now, like I said, it wasn't completely shattered; it's in pieces. I'm sure some type of resin or bond would probably repair it. Should I repair it? I kind of, like I said, I found all the pieces, I put them in a bag, and I just kind of left them. I've been kind of against repairing it because I'm worried if I repair it, actually, I'll do even more damage to what it's already done if it's in pieces. And like I said, it's just one arm. The rest of the statue's fine. So I'm just curious about that. And also, if I figured if anybody wanted to buy it off of me, they probably would have preferred to have not repair it because they would want to repair it themselves or get somebody else that was certainly more skilled than I was to repair it for them. So there's that too. But yeah, that having been said, anybody want a statue? Make me an offer. So I don't know what exactly is coming for the Darkness, but I do know that the second Darkness game, and reviewers have talked about this, Angry Joe talked about this, the second, it's not, it ends on a big cliffhanger. I mean, there's a twist ending. I'm not going to say what happens, but it ends on a twist ending and a cliffhanger. And my question is like, well, if you're going to end it on a big twist ending and cliffhanger, then that means you better be making a third game. Because I do not like when developers, do that and they just release one game. I don't like that at all. And they never finish the story or tell the story. I mean, it happened with Anachronox. It happened with Splatterhouse. It just, I should say the Splatterhouse remake. I don't know. So I'm really looking forward to a third game. It sounds to me like if you're going to end it on this big a cliffhanger, that Digital Stream wants to be the one to do it. So there's that. As for what I would expect in a third game, I just don't know. I kind of am curious like what the path that they're deciding to go. I did a bit more research on the comics after the second game came out because as part of some of the deal with you get with the limited edition of the Darkness 2, you do get digital downloadable versions of the Darkness miniseries. I'm sorry, some of the early Darkness comics, and I read through every single one of them that was included in those volumes, and I have to say that at least from what I read, there was nothing that was included there that that met with the mythology, which what they were going for with the end of the second game. But that having been said, it was still interesting regardless. I'm really looking forward to what this does from a story and character perspective. I kind of wish the second game had a bit more interactivity, because there was just a lot of space in there when either the mansion or in what the hell segments were. I did like how they were decided that the hell segments were going to be like something out of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But there wasn't really any interactivity with the game on that level. Certainly not in the level of what the first game had. There was no playable televisions and stuff. But it was a fantastic game nevertheless. Great fun. Great music selection. Great choice of that. And I'm really looking forward to the third game. So that's my take on the Darkness and the whole Darkness series. Hopefully there's going to be more games on it. Had a lot of experience with the Darkness too. I think that, it's like me talking about it is just interesting because like I had so much, I felt like such a part of the game's publicity. I got a whole bunch of the game's, swag that they were giving out. I was fortunate enough to win 2 Darklings. I mean, who can say that? I got the comic books. I got the ski masks. All that cool stuff. Oh, funny side story. I guess I can tell this story. Nobody's going to bother me because it's just an anecdote. When I won the Darkling and I found out I was going to get the second one, I actually had this whole idea that I wanted to shoot a parody short for the website, which is why I made that Jackie costume. The Jackie costume you see me wearing in the unboxing was originally intended for a short that I was going to do. And I actually asked for permission to 2K's permission to actually do it. Now, I'm fairly certain I have the right to parody regardless, but I got a letter back from 2K. I kind of wanted 2K's blessing on it, just for, not for legal reasons, but just for peace of mind reasons. And unfortunately, 2K couldn't give it to me. And I totally understood why. I think it was because I don't blame them for giving it to me, because I kind of gave them a basic rundown of what the concept was going to be. I had this brilliant idea. I was actually inspired a little bit by what Yahtzee said, where there was a scene in the first Darkness game where Jackie, after having discovered his powers, has to get out of the cemetery, and actually, in order to get out of the cemetery, he has to spawn a Darkling for the first time and make it move a car. So here you have your first minion, as Yahtzee put it, and you're going to use it not to help you take over the world, but actually use it as your qualified breakdown service. I was going to play that up in the parody, which I never did. And basically it would have been a cool thing where I would have used the statue as like a puppet and shot it in a certain way where me dressed as Jackie's trying to get out of the cemetery, use the Darkling as a puppet, talk to him for a little bit, and get him to get it behind the wheel of the car and move it. I thought it would have been really funny. But and I would have done it had I gotten 2K's blessing, but I couldn't get it. And I think the reason why, to be perfectly honest, is probably because it wasn't 2K's to give. I mean, here's a property that's basically a comic book property that's basically stretched out over many people. Obviously, I don't blame 2K for telling me I couldn't do it, and the reason why is because I don't think they had the right to give me the right to do it. So, like I said, no hard feelings, 2K. I'm not mad at you, about any of that stuff. I'm glad you even talked to me about it in the first place. I really was appreciative of even getting, having your ear about that. So I thought that was really cool. But out of respect, I decided not to do it. That I even said, me telling the story about that was just an idea I had. I don't think it was going to offend anybody. I thought it would have made for a funny short. I had a bunch of people actually lined up for helping me out on it. The unknown camera person was working on some of the optical effects I want to do. I don't have the capability of doing CGI. So all the effects I was going to do for it were all going to be conventional effects. I was going to use puppetry, and I was going to use lighting effects with actual lights, and I was going to use stunt drivers for moving the car with them, and I was just going to stick the mask on them and make a stunt driver move the car. I thought it would have been really funny. And I thought it would have looked cool. And I was going to use, I was going to make my own sound effects and have, the camera person actually had, sound equipment, like sound recording equipment, a lot of sound recording equipment. And what we were going to do was we were going to actually record, I was either going to do the voiceover or the Darkling, we were going to synthesize it so it sounded weird. So it was going to be, I could write my own dialogue for both of us and do both parts, and then the Darkling would just be, voiceover, modulated, and stuff like that. So I thought that would have been cool, but we didn't do it, so that's, the story will live on through this podcast. So you just picture it in your minds right now. And I promise if you do, I promise not to sue you for violation of copyright. As Monty Python had said, is with the teaser trailer for Life of Brian, he's like, we invite you to picture it in your minds now, and if we do, we promise not to sue you for violation of. So I'll let you picture the short in your minds now, and because I can't do it, and but I thought it would have been funny. So I'd like to thank you for listening to me babble on and on about the Darkness. If you haven't played any of the Darkness games, play them. I thought the games were great. I enjoyed both of them tremendously. I thought they were a lot of fun. The first Darkness game is probably going to be tough to find, but if you do find it, you'll probably find it pretty cheap. Definitely you'll be able to find it used, I'm sure. As for the second Darkness game, it's out now on the PC, Xbox 360, and PS3. The first Darkness game is only out for the PS3 and the Xbox 360, though. But if you can find the, obviously the Darkness 2, if you can find the limited edition of the Darkness 2, I definitely recommend it because there's a lot of cool downloadable content with it and a really cool poster included with it as well. Just a lot of fun. For those of you who are also interested in learning any more about the Darkness, I recommend the Comixology app for the iPhone and iPad. And I think there might even be an Android version of it. I don't know, but obviously, if you buy the limited edition of the Darkness 2, you'll get a download code for some free volumes of the Darkness, and those are definitely worth a read. I remember reading some of the first issues actually, which were reprinted when they Top Cat had their own website and stuff like that. They included the first issues of a lot of the issues, and actually even the first issues of some of that stuff was included on the as for behind the scenes material and bonus material for the first Darkness game. The first Darkness game had a ton of bonus material, and some of the issues were that. Other cool stuff. One other little cool anecdote I remember was I remembered reading. I don't know, there was a local comic convention in my town, which never happened before. And I couldn't even believe it was even happening. And I remember visiting, and they had a bunch of artists, and they had a bunch of writers and stuff like that there. And I was going through some of the stuff, and I saw some of the Top Cow writings, like the Magdalena and the Witchblade, and they had a guy selling some of those graphic novels, and I started going through them, and I was looking to see if I remembered any of the graphic novels or any of the issues of the graphic novels from the Darkness bonus material. And while they did have plenty of that stuff, the only one I could remember that the guy was still selling was the Cyberforce graphic novel. And that was for Cyberforce Volume 3, and I was curious about how that series was going to go based upon reading the first issue on the Darkness video game. And I told the guy about it. I said I really wanted to know what that was going for. So the guy actually sold it to me at a pretty discounted price and signed it. And a nice guy. So I think he was the writer. He wasn't the artist. I think he was the writer. So I kind of feel bad, actually, because I think I told him at the time I really did like the art style. So I didn't know it was the artist, that he wasn't the artist. I thought he was. I thought he was the artist at the time. I didn't find out until later that. So I kind of do feel a jerk about that. But I did say that I wanted to see how it ended because I had read the initial issue in the Darkness video game, and I wanted to see how the rest of the story went. So there was that. But the guy signed it and gave me I think it was a $20 book. He sold it to me for $10. So I felt pretty good about the deal. And I don't know, I've actually asked Linkara to review that book, and the reason why was because I know he doesn't like the artist very much. So he has not reviewed that book, but I kind of hope he does. So thanks for listening to me ramble on about video games and comics in general and stuff like that. I'm going to obviously be recording more podcasts and stuff like that for later stuff. But like I said with the last podcast, I've gotten to the point where I don't like saying what my next subject is going to be because I kind of feel like it's being restrictive. Over the last couple of podcasts that I've done, I'll usually get an idea for a podcast that I want to do. And then over the course of between recording the podcast, I have something else I'm working on, and then I'd be like, oh, I wish I could record this podcast now while it's fresh, but I'd have to put it off until after I do the next podcast. So it's gotten to that point where I'm just basically stopping telling people what I'm, stop posting what I'm going to do next, because I feel that's been kind of restricted, but it's been working out pretty well for me so far at this point. But yes, there will be further podcasts coming out. I also plan on shooting another video this week. So stay posted to my YouTube channel for that. It's not going to be podcast related, so don't worry about that. It's just going to be another site video. So thanks for listening to me ramble on. This is Maniac with GameAccess.net. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks a bunch for listening. Over and out.